All right, I hope everybody's had a great week. I personally am not in the best mood, kind of, um, you know, just a little jaded by by all the news that's been happening. I think people focus so much. I was having conversations with a couple people this week. They focus so much more on the news that pertains to their own agenda than on news that actually is of the widest possible common interest. And I probably include myself in there, but it's very frustrating when you're trying to share a story, when you're trying to write a story, and you show people basically a truth that I think is, very undeniable, that would eminently help them prove one of their, prove their case, vindicate them. Yet they don't care. I was talking earlier about to somebody, and they said, well, it's all because people don't understand that nobody cares about their topic. We're talking specifically, I think, the story that I've worked on for the longest time is, of course, the issue with Bernie Sanders, the primaries, not the primaries, but the Russian troll story. I call it the Mattis file, where you see basically a media conglomerate like MSNBC. Well, NBC Universal is the conglomerate behind it, and they don't really care about the truth. You see the same thing with the Huffington Post. You see the same, and you can document from beginning to end how they're dishonest and how they're not just dishonest, they're actually openly embracing a hoax. So, instead people want to deal with fighting with Peter Dow, who nobody's going to care if Peter Dow is honestly, if Peter Dow acknowledges their point, nobody is going to care. The general public doesn't care what Peter Dow thinks. A lot of these progressive people that I've tried to notify of the story and work with, they have acknowledged, and this is multiple people. Last night I was chatting with one. I'm not going to say his name because he's a nice person, even if he's a progressive, but let's say chatting with him on Twitter, and he said, "Yeah, your story is absolutely correct, and it makes a lot of sense, but there's not a lot of public interest in it right now." It's like, so basically, you complain over and over again that the Democrats are ignoring you, that the media ignores you, that people don't care what you think, that you're basically misrepresented. Then when you're actually presented with evidence and a clear timeline that shows that you're correct, it's not public interest. I think I have to turn down the video settings here, so you're going to have to forgive me for a second. It's going to be a little boring. Let's see here. Turn down the video settings. Let's see if that works any better. All right. Just lowered the bit rate, but for some reason it's still just as bad. So I just wanted to introduce a number of topics today. We're gonna be talking about, of course, the issue of Venezuela. And why is Venezuela suddenly in the news? It's not because of what's happening in Venezuela today. Hold on, I just have to open the live page. It's not because of that. It's because people are in a tizzy over the fact that Donald Trump has decided to basically, in 2017, he was considering and asking about invading Venezuela. And, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have supported an invasion of Venezuela. I think it would have been a horrible idea. But the fact is that it did not happen. The fact is that, we're gonna be talking a lot about what the media priorities are. Now, what the media likes about this is that it's evidence through a leak that the Trump administration was considering an invasion of a sovereign country. But the fact of the matter is that we've invaded sovereign countries before, and the media has been all for it. In fact, sometimes the media actively encourages it. So now, when there's evidence that it was considered for invasion, or so they claim, because it again is mostly through anonymous sources. They want to make it seem like this is a major story. Well, it's not as major of a story as you might think. This is this is the issue of a media that, let's say that he had invaded Venezuela. I think that they definitely would have criticized him. Then you get to the possibility that he would never invade. He never would have invaded Venezuela. Well, or never even considered it. Well, then some of them would start arguing for the case of intervening in Venezuela, and they have. Okay, and there's this article, the case for, I think it's, one second. There was an article a while ago. Let me see here. I think it was in 2017. So they actually did have this in 2017. This was in Newsweek. U.S. military wants to invade Venezuela. Invented. Let me see here. Let me mute this tab. Invented a humanitarian crisis to do it, Maduro administration says. So apparently the Maduro administration knew this, and the humanitarian crisis was invented. So why is there news now? Why is this news now when apparently President Maduro knew at the time? So suddenly the mainstream media is believing the president of Venezuela. Do you think that's a little contradictory? And who's this source? And again, they're going to be saying, well, we're using reliable sources, like what's his name, Brian Stelter says. Well, I'm here to tell you that it doesn't really matter so much whether Trump did want to invade Venezuela or not. The fact is that it didn't happen, and it doesn't have to happen. And it's not. I actually, I hope it doesn't happen. But there's people who would like it to happen, and then whatever happens, they will blame Trump, but they will reap the benefit of it. Oil contractors, whatever. But these people they're not in it in order to benefit the Trump administration. Ryoshishka says, I will offer 10 billion bagels if she takes a DNA test. What's the whole I don't understand the bagel joke. Let's fill an airplane bomber with bagels and launch them at those hungry people. So, by the way, did you guys get the notification? I keep seeing that there is no notifications. Pinochet was usually saying it. But in any case, what they're going to try to do now is make the case that because the United States was considering, or Trump himself was considering invading Venezuela, that he's a loose cannon. But the fact of the matter is that he didn't. And you don't know what the purpose was. Now, this is a person who claimed that in an open setting, including with other leaders, other South American leaders, Trump actually asked about invading Venezuela. Well, if that's the case, then how come you're the only person who's leaked it until now, except for apparently President Maduro? So maybe it did happen. Maybe it got to... What the fuck is going on here? This computer is really bothering me. Let's see. Gotta move this over. This computer's really been slowing down, and it's long past due for some sort of maintenance or something. Here we go. Close this window. So When asked about Venezuela's debt restructuring plan, Rodriguez said the best way, so this is Delcy Rodriguez, the best way to help her country is to ask Trump to lift U.S. sanctions because it would open ways to finance its debt. But why did you get into debt to begin with? The reason countries get into debt and then they're not offered credit is because they can't repay their loans. So then why would people? I mean, I kind of wonder why countries extend to us credit, or why financial there should probably be a debt ceiling limit. Why do we always have to, that's the issue, that they keep lifting the debt ceiling in the United States, because the United States does have the largest consumer economy in the world. And yet people want to say, well, that's not fair. We should be able to spend as much as we want. And so should these other countries that basically can't even pay back anybody. That's their logic. Their logic is that, not lending more money is a human rights violation or something. It's not. Ryushishka says 4 wars, they didn't say shit. Well, it's more than 4 wars. Let's do a count, okay? And this is, by the way, the left-wing media, the very far left-wing media, some of them were always objecting to a war with Venezuela. And I happen to agree with them that there shouldn't be a war with Venezuela. They'll collapse on their own, and then they'll still blame us because of sanctions. They consider when it's a country they hate, sanctions are the answer. When it's a country they love, sanctions are a human rights crime. But they suddenly they call us moralists. Those of us that don't support the Venezuelan government. Let's see here. This. I'll have to take a look at it later. But the fact of the matter is that Venezuela is going to fail with or without a U.S. invasion. Now, those asking for a U.S. invasion are out of their fucking minds, because there's no reason that we should be in any way, shape, or form deployed in South America. Now, but yeah, I'm going to keep going, and we're going to move off of Venezuela soon after we read this article. Ryushishka is correct. These people didn't care when the U.S. invaded Panama. They didn't care when the U.S. invaded, the Persian Gulf War was a little different, but they didn't care when we bombed Bosnia. A lot of these people didn't care during the Kosovo invasion. There were very few people who protested the Kosovo invasion. And those very few people are essentially a consistent anti-war crowd. And you know what? If that's what you really, really believe in, I think, you got to respect that to a certain extent. Would you object to literally any war that's ever happened? What are you? I mean, if you're a total pacifist, then you should be protesting all the wars of other countries that are not the United States. But they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Their whole premise is that the United States should never be involved in another war. So in this case, I would say I do oppose any U.S. intervention in Venezuela. If Donald Trump would have done that, I probably would have totally opposed it, but he didn't do it. Now, what's their line going to be? Well, he almost invaded Venezuela because he really wanted to. Well, almost doesn't count here. This isn't horseshoes. Military invasions aren't horseshoes. So most of these people, and some of them say, well, we were progressives, we did oppose the war. Well, you didn't oppose the war very strongly under President Obama. The war in Libya. The war in the war in Iraq was still going on. The war in Yemen. Now you're objecting after he's out of office. A lot of the people that were protesting while he was in office were, objecting, but with a very soft tone, or people were ignoring them. One of the few people I would say was very consistent about it was Cornel West, and you have to give him credit for it. USA dollar is also the world's reverse currency, so that is why I think we still get to raise the ceiling. Well, we shouldn't be raising the ceiling. It's stupid. I said when Obama administration started about 4 new wars under his time, and they didn't say, they didn't say it under Obama. They didn't say it under Bush. The most of the world objected to Bush invading Iraq, but they actually didn't, and they were correct about it. But the fact of the matter is that they've been, once they'd already gotten into the war, the U.S. we had already gotten into the war. They really didn't they didn't object past that to many of the things that happened since then, and then they get into their own wars. You see people that suddenly believe that the Trump administration is more of a war criminal. And by the way, the war criminal thing that they throw out, they actually don't understand how a war crime will work. The whole premise of war crimes was invented largely after World War II. And how many wars have actually occurred without people being prosecuted for war crimes? Was anybody prosecuted for the war crimes in Vietnam? And I'm not just saying on the U.S. side. I'm saying on the Vietnamese side. These same people who want the U.S. brought up for war crimes will never, ever, ever, ever call for the prosecution of North Vietnamese and Viet Cong soldiers for war crimes. They have a slanted view of justice. It's just us, JUSTUS. Justice just for us. And that's why when people accuse other people of war crimes, I find it extremely facetious and dishonest, because they don't actually believe that everybody should be charged for crimes within a war. And then they also have a selective definition of which wars they object to. You'll never see an anti-war protest over what's going on whenever India and Pakistan go to war. I just say that because I do talk to Arjuna very frequently. And, whoops. I think I've come to focus a little more on what's going on in that part of the world than I used to. They don't talk about war crimes happening in South America and Peru, where the senderos would basically massacre entire villages. Because in their mind, the senderos are warriors against poverty and corporate dominance of Peru. Well, okay, so that justifies people getting their entire village hacked to death or whatever, in the jungle, because some sort of Maoist professor, who, by the way, is of European descent, decided that, we're going to create a great proletarian revolution among Indians. So most of the victims are Indians, and then he tries to say, well, I was just trying to better their lives. Well, maybe you should have shut the fuck up and not even intervened. That's basically what happened in Peru back in the 80s. Now, I'm going off on a tangent, but I have this article up, and this is why I would say that it doesn't matter now that Trump was considering invading Venezuela, because Venezuela is collapsing in on themselves. And there's people saying, China is going to bail them out. What you don't realize is that it means that China will effectively take over the country. And therefore, what standing do you have? You're basically saying that it's better for Venezuela to be a pawn of the Chinese government and have a nominal socialist revolution that doesn't really achieve anything, that actually keeps people in poverty. That's better than them being a capitalist country that might have ties to the United States. So essentially, you don't have a moral standing on any basis. Not a moral standing, not a strategic standing. Not a strategic standing, because China, if they're committing imperialism in South America, why is that any morally better than the USA doing it? Why is it better than the British or the French doing it, or Spain? Why is it better than colonial times? Because China happens to be a country that's not in Europe. So this says Venezuela's domestic airline industry is struggling to maintain operations due to hyperinflation and shortages of spare parts, according to an industry association, making it increasingly hard to obtain tickets and causing chronic flight delays. The domestic air fleet has shrunk 80% since 2014 to around 20 functioning aircraft, the Venezuelan Air Industry Association, Ceveta, says, leaving Venezuelans struggling to travel to visit relatives or receive medical treatment. That comes atop a steady withdrawal since 2016 of international airlines, many of which left Venezuela after years investing in what was once one of Latin America's richest countries. Now, I don't care if people say this is a biased source. This is Reuters. If you want to send me your shit source and then claim that, oh, because the real news says this, then you got another thing coming, because the real news is real bullshit. That's all I can see out of it. You know, this is this is a reference to somebody specific that I've had conversations with. 8 local airlines continue flying, the most active of which are Laser, Avior, and state-run Conviasa. Civeta President Jorge Alvarez told Reuters on June 26th. He added that airlines have cut services because they cannot obtain dollars through the country's currency control system. So this is the Venezuelan head of the Civil Air Association, and he's talking. You know, this is a Venezuelan talking about it. Sorry, I think I do have to take this call. 1 second. We will be back. Okay, sorry about that. That was an important call. I hope you guys can still hear me if you're watching. So, yeah, people say that Venezuela would be fine without currency restrictions, but these are numbers since 2014, an 80% drop in aircraft capacity. Okay, he had that we don't have replacement parts because the government is not able to provide the hard currency we need, said Alvarez, a former airline executive. If I don't have dollars, I can't offer better service. So you can't buy airplane parts from France or from the U.S. or there are other Russia, for example, does have a civil aviation industry. The shekel deal. Yeah, the shekel isn't exactly the most fungible currency, so I don't know why people keep talking about it. Ticket prices are fixed by the government in the local bolivar currency, while replacement parts must be purchased abroad in dollars. With the bolivar depreciating rapidly, airlines are left unable to afford the parts needed to keep up maintenance. For domestic flights, airlines now typically sell only one-way tickets. When people want to return home from a trip, they usually have to line up at the airport on the day they hope to travel. So this is great, right? You know, everybody was talking about how public transportation would get better under socialism, and here's the evidence that now you can just line up on the day you want to travel and maybe hope to get a flight back home. Ismaelita Fernandez said she flew to Caracas from Margarita Island with her sister to get treatment for a brain tumor and had to wait 24 hours to get a return ticket. My sister was, so this is a woman coming back from, a surgery. She can't get a flight back home. It makes me feel completely helpless. President Nicolas Maduro blames the country's crisis on an economic war that he says is orchestrated by political adversaries with the help of Washington. Critics of the leftist president say the problems are the result of the government's currency and price controls as well. Yes, and I don't talk about just price controls there in Venezuela. I talk about them here in the U.S. Rent control is bullshit as well for the very same reason, by the way. Rent control actually increases rents in surrounding living spaces. So Airlines are not allowed to sell tickets for domestic flights above the prices set by the government. Flights generally cost about half the price of a taxi ride to the airport. But getting hold of tickets usually requires buying them from intermediaries for more than double their list price. So they keep the price down, and it gets bought up by a bunch of people, and those people sell it at a higher price. That's how socialism does work, by the way. There's no way to stop that, by the way. What are they supposed to do? Oh, now we're going to distribute the tickets based on need. Okay, how do they determine need? What if there's a lot of people who have a need for the ticket, but there's not enough tickets and there's not enough flights? So how does that work with socialism? Oh, we're going to buy more planes. Well, you don't have any dollars, do you? You can't fix the planes that you have because you're using a currency that's artificially artificially tampered with. That's why these people don't understand literally anything about how economics works. Okay, and then they want to complain that the U.S. is going to thought about invading Venezuela, but this country, Venezuela, can't even put fucking airplanes in the air like almost any other country in the world can. Especially a country with the development that it used to have. Regulations make domestic flights unprofitable, said Nicola Furnari of Travel and Tourism Industry Association of Avit. The problem is that the real prices are well above what the average Venezuelan can afford. Some local companies have sought to maintain their domestic operations by opening up foreign flights, which are paid in dollars, to compensate for losses on their domestic operations and to cater to people leaving the country for good. So the biggest moneymaker right now in Venezuela is selling flights out of the country in order to, for people who don't plan on coming back. That's what is going on. Ryo Shiska says, you lie. Socialism is a heaven. Just look at Venezuela. We ear dogs and we can't fix our planes and we can't get, I think he says we eat dogs. But your American propaganda is a lie. So they said, Nicolas Maduro wants to claim that the U.S. was they created a fake humanitarian crisis. But the fact of the matter is that here you see, and this is from Reuters, it's not from Fox News, it's not from the Daily Caller, it's not from Alex Jones, it's not from, and this is from people within the industry, within the airline industry in Venezuela. Are you going to tell me that that's capitalist propaganda? You probably still will, those of you that care about this, because you don't have any actual objective thinking here. So, it's just, the excuses are pathetic. And I'm tired of hearing people try to say that, oh, well, he was thinking about invading Venezuela. Well, maybe Venezuela, instead of worrying about something that Trump was thinking about doing a year ago and talk to people about, maybe they should actually talk about solving their own country's problems. And I'll tell you what, if Venezuela becomes basically a Chinese puppet state, like I think it will be, I think that might actually be a better, and I don't care if Venezuelans now start saying to me, you don't have any principles. If China basically takes over Venezuela, then it would probably be better than it is right now. And that's not saying much. And Shiska says, do something about that cough. I've always had the cough. God damn it, Shiska. Why don't you share the stream? Maybe that'll make the cough go away. Okay, 8 local airlines continue flying, the most active of which are Laser Avior. I think we read through this already. So this guy says it's terrible. He said he had to wait 24 hours to buy a ticket to visit his grandmother in the hospital. So this is just for domestic flights in Venezuela. Now, you probably are wondering, why can't they just drive in Venezuela? Well, I mean, I think they're selling most of their oil to to export. So they good luck gassing up your car. So that's about it. And we're going to change the topic. I did want to address, because people would probably say, well, how come you're not talking about the United States not thinking about invading Venezuela. Well, they didn't. So what do you want now? You want to continue dwelling on things that didn't happen? I mean, are you gonna be like those people who wonder if the Bills won the Super Bowl, if that field goal would have gone in? That's basically their argument, that we were thinking about invading Venezuela, therefore that's why they're failing, because President Trump was thinking about it. It's like he's able to mind control the country's failure by giving it negative energy, bad juju or something. That's their argument. Then they talk about the economic war. Yeah, nobody wants to be your friend. You don't pay people back for money that they lend to you, so fuck you. That's basically my message to the government of Venezuela. The regular people of Venezuela, by the way, are never going to. This is my prediction, because this is Jaded Friday, by the way. We're going to make a new custom. I'm probably not going to be live streaming that much anymore, and I already have stopped live streaming very frequently, just because of scheduling changes. But and also, you guys aren't getting my notifications anyway, so you have to check the channel and check the goddamn bell that you're getting the notifications, or I don't care if you're not getting them, because next week you're just going to see me a lot less. Sorry to say that, or maybe you're not sorry to not see me as much, but the fact of the matter is that Venezuela, people don't really care about it, and you know what? I'll make a frank admission. It's not because there are plenty of countries in the world that have horrible conditions. The reason that I highlight Venezuela is because it's an excellent economic indicator. It's a country that has all of the resources needed to succeed, and yet people continue to make excuses by talking about an economic war. Sorry, but your corrupt government squirreled a lot of the money away, got into huge debt. You can't pay the debt back, and soon you're going to be owned by China. So now you're complaining about a U.S. invasion that actually didn't happen. You're complaining about a coup that happened 16 years ago. Okay, and look, it's time for people who supported this regime to understand it's not progressive anymore. It's not, if you're saying that it's not socialist, then why are you defending it? Because the invasion didn't happen. Let's see here. Venezuela is taken over by China. We will sure invade it because the USA will not make China be so close in their back. No, we're not going to invade Venezuela. If we do invade Venezuela, I'll oppose it. I don't care if China deserves to take over Venezuela. They owe them all that money. And I'll tell that to Carlos too, if Carlos comes back on the show, or any of the other Venezuelans I've had on the show. And it's not personally against them. If you run up all that debt to another country, like they did with Venezuela, and you can't pay it back, then China deserves 1,000% to be taken over by them. How is there also a chat window down here? And then, so Petro Caribe, do you know about this? Yeah. Petro Caribe, and this is the last thing. We're moving off of Venezuela because there are other topics to talk about. It's called American Gladio. It's not Venezuelan Gladio. Petro Caribe, do you know about this? Yes. Petro Caribe was a program by which Venezuela would share a lot of its oil reserves with other countries in the Caribbean, and a lot of them were not Trinidad, but it would be St. Kitts, a country that most people have never heard of. St. Kitts or Nicaragua, for example. They had this ambitious plan to use it to buy up infrastructure around these countries and supply them with discounted oil reserves and probably develop the countries better. It didn't work because the countries that they were sharing it with were not exactly the most. They were corrupt as well, just like Venezuela is corrupt, and they squandered it away, and so did Venezuela. And now Petro Caribe practically doesn't exist. I think it exists as a formality because Venezuela doesn't have enough oil coming out of the ground to actually supply them. TM Ryder says hi. Hi, man. Thanks a lot. Please share the stream. Next Radio says, do you think it's acceptable to allow China to get a hold of Venezuela's oil reserves? Look, I'm not talking about what I hope will happen. I'm saying what the fact of the matter is that Venezuela borrowed a lot of money from China and they borrowed a lot of money from Russia. So do you think it's acceptable for Venezuela to to basically pretend for all these years that we're having this fantastic relationship with all these countries? Meanwhile, they're getting screwed up the ass because the actual yield of all these benefits is being sequestered in other countries in Swiss bank accounts by people within the Venezuelan government. So unfortunately, I have a friend, and he has this saying. And my friend's name is Super Joe. He has a saying, and you can disagree with it, but every country in the world gets the ruler they deserve. And unfortunately, with Venezuela, they supported Chavez for years, and they believed in him. And they a lot of them still they come to the United States. They still have this belief in this like a country can run up massive debts and nothing's going to happen to it. And then they want to wonder why I think that China is entitled to take over a lot of these assets. Well, they are. What do you want from them? Do you want China to just extend credit to? Do you think it's right that the United States keeps borrowing money from China? Because I think there's a problem with that too, if we're going to be consistent. Malevolent Rider. Did they ban you, buddy? I'm sorry, man. Oh my God. Man, did they ban your account? I haven't seen you in a while. So yeah, that's my answer to that question. And you know what? Unfortunately, if we continue down this road, and by the way, if China doesn't execute some sort of takeover and the country defaults, then they're not going to get their money back. That affects China. It's the same concept that's happening here. It's why the U.S. does have to address at least the trade relationship with China. Do you think it's correct to let the trade relationship with China continue the way it's been going on for years? Like the way a lot of libertarians think it is? That's also a problem. The borrowing issue, a lot of these libertarians say, well, we should have free trade with China. It only hurts the consumer that it's happening this way. And then they say, well, we also should reduce the debt. But then the government doesn't reduce the debt. So therefore, one plank of your policy gets China to have a massive amount of debt from us, we're indebted to China because of one plank of their policy, because of our trade relationship to them. And then the other plank of their policy, which is supposed to compensate for that, reducing the deficit, cutting spending, doesn't happen. So what? So we're supposed to fly with two wings on one side? Is that the solution? Those are the Cato Institution people. If they owe money, they have to pay back, and they have no military to protect them from them taking it, so they will get taken over. Yeah, the Chinese government, you can criticize China all the time, but what do you want? Do you want them to just keep lending money and get nothing in return? Because this is not about fairness, it's about strategy. And I'm sorry to tell you, but China's strategy in this relationship was much better than Venezuela's. That's about it for Venezuela. Enough of that crap. Obviously I wish the best for them. We're going to talk about Chicago public schools now. We're not going to go through this whole thing because I don't have time today. You can see the link below. But they're basically talking about sexual assaults that go unchecked in Chicago public schools. So let's hear him.
May have, in one case, I think the person violently pushed someone down the stairs and almost killed the person, but pleaded it down to something that wasn't on CPS's offense list. But if they had actually went in and saw what the person did, which was not up for debate, this is probably not someone you want working in the school.
Right.
But my point about staffing, if you're just doing a checklist, that's easy. If you need someone to go into each and every one of these offenses and look at the details of them, that means you need an army of people. Right. Because their background checks being done all of the time. And we have an administration in CPS under our mayor that has disinvested in staffing, disinvested in schools, done everything they possibly could to redirect money from students, from schools, from staffing, and toward their campaign contributors.
So where would you prioritize resources to make sure that staffing was a central focus, particularly staffing that ensured schools were safe and supportive environments, both because the school leadership and school staff was being properly trained, and also because the number of people, both inside of the school buildings and at central office, can support a highly functioning school system? How would you reprioritize or change the way finances were spent in Chicago public schools?
And so we have this phenomenon in CPS where they actually complain about the need to pay teachers, for example. And I'll make the connection if you don't see it already, that they'll say, if we didn't have to spend so much money on teachers, we could we could spend more on classroom expenses. What is the biggest classroom expense? The teacher. Mm-hmm. It's like saying that, well, the biggest in terms of on the books as a principal, the biggest classroom expense, the thing you pay the most money for is staff. Right. It's the teacher salary. And so it's like saying that, you know, the Washington Wizards could have a great basketball team if we didn't have to spend so much money on the player salaries. We can make the Washington Wizards a great basketball team.
Doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it doesn't make any sense in CPS either, or in education either. And so I would prioritize making sure that students have adequate staffing. Now, what does that look like in detail? That looks like investing in curriculum, and it looks like investing in instruction. And even in both of those, you're talking about staffing. And so if we expand curriculum, for example, that means our kids get the kind of education that Rom's kids get at the University of Chicago Lab School, where they take documentary film production, where they take drama, where they take theater, where they learn a world language from 3rd through 8th grade. And so when you expand the curriculum, it means hiring more staff to teach that curriculum. It means hiring people who are expert in those things.
So you're talking a little bit about a specialized school that has resources that perhaps other schools don't have.
He's talking about a magnet school. It's okay to say the word magnet.
Some of the schools in this report from the Tribune are some of the premier schools in Chicago public schools. How would you propose to mitigate, or why do you think there was a culture where someone could be repeatedly brought back into the school, or that there are schools that are supposed to be premier schools that have multiple staff members over time during the course of this report?
Unions!
That are being reported for abuse of children.
Yeah, I was actually working my way up to that. And so we're talking about prioritizing resources. I'm looking at the school district in general and then working my way specifically into these allegations. And so the other thing that you invest in is instruction, or the increasing the capacity of the staff to do their job. Capacity building. For a teacher, capacity building looks like improving their ability to teach. For a principal, capacity building means improving their ability to do instructional leadership, to make sure that district policies are being followed, and also to make sure that the culture and climate of your building is one that supports learning, to make sure you're following the rules and you have security personnel in place and doing the right things, basically building your capacity and building your staff's capacity to do their job. One of those jobs, getting more specifically to your point, is keeping our students safe, following state and local laws and rules that are designed to make sure they are kept safe. For example, every summer we go to a law department seminar for 3 days.
So you see, they keep dancing around the topic because first of all, Rahm Emanuel and his administration, nobody should excuse them for their pathetic leadership of Chicago. All right. Malevolent. How hard is it to pronounce that? I mean, I agree with you, but maybe they went to Chicago public schools. So there's your answer. Focus on the topic, guys. So the issue at hand is, why are all these teachers basically getting, well, I'm not sure. I mean, are they talking about student? It's not clear who they're talking about. Is it teachers assaulting students sexually? Is it students assaulting other students sexually? What exactly are they talking about? And then they say, well, why is Mayor Emanuel saying, if we didn't have to pay these teachers so much, maybe we could hire other staff? Well, it's correct. You have a teachers union that's run buck wild, and they continue to basically go on strike literally all the time. And I don't understand why these people can't say it. Well, I get the reason. This is the real news. And they're all about unions for some reason, even though this is a union public school system. And there's really no, I mean, what's the excuse this time? The excuse this time is that there's not enough guidance and standards. Well, if you go to any of these schools, these teachers are basically in seminars all the time.
In one of the brand new high schools in the city. And the law department reviews with principals the times where a principal, they have these case studies where a principal messed up or a staff member messed up and it didn't get caught. And so they review these things with us, but they've never reviewed, in my time there, any allegations of sexual assault or the way a principal mishandled sexual assault, because apparently that wasn't a priority, or apparently they weren't tracking it. And so if you're going to track it, you have to dedicate resources to that. If you're going to build principals' capacity, it means hiring people who can do the training, people who are in risk management and people who are in child advocacy, bringing those two professions or those two areas.
Yeah, those people are not teachers, okay? So either you agree that the teachers are a huge resource and that ends up getting a massive amount of money because they're always on strike and they keep asking for more pay, or you think that this isn't a big enough a problem to deal with. Or you're saying that you just need more money, which is probably what he's going to end up saying.
Together to ensure that principals and school staff know exactly what they need to do. And so in large part, school-wide or district-wide, we talk about investing in capacity building, your capacity to do every aspect of your job. But then we take that down into the particular when we're talking about student safety and invest in those things that are targeted toward making sure students are safe and building their capacity to do that. Did that answer your question?
It does. And at the top of this conversation, you spoke a little bit about one of the factors in this report, which was that the legal department doing the investigation of the accusation also would turn around and use those details against alleged victims of the abuse that has been reported. How would you reshape the leadership or impart a sense of leadership that prioritizes the safety of children at all levels, even with executives inside of the school district?
And so this may not seem like a connection at the outset, but it is the most critical component whatsoever. And it's changing our campaign finance laws, because we have a mayor who prioritizes not the needs of students. He doesn't prioritize the needs of students because he prioritizes the needs of his campaign donors. He spends more than half his days. The Tribune also investigated the mayor's campaign finances. They had a front page article, and that article was titled, and so this may not machine. And in that article, they showed that 60 of his top 100 donors all got some kind of kickback or some sort of benefit or contract from either the school district or the city. 60 of his top 100 donors. They also found that he spent more than half his days meeting with his donors. And they even tracked certain meetings and then certain donations to his campaign, which then led to contracts from the city or the school system. And so we see that's how he spends the majority of his time and energy, because that is his focus. His focus is not on making sure kids are safe. His focus is on taking the resources that are meant for our children.
So you saw that headline there, where this is why his administration is mostly white. So they want to make this a racial issue. But the real problem is that you elected Rahm Emanuel. Yes, all of the progressives elected Rahm Emanuel back in 2010 or whenever he was elected. It might have been 2011. And then suddenly he's not progressive enough because he's full of crap. So they want to elect another guy who will probably be of the same type, virtually the same character. He just doesn't know it yet.
And redirecting those resources towards his campaign donors. And so that leads to the closing of schools, right? That leads to a narrow curriculum. That leads to understaffing, and it leads you to neglect your responsibility to keep them safe. All of these scandals that have occurred under this mayor can be tracked back to one degree or another to the fact that he prioritizes his campaign donors over his responsibility to be a good steward over our city and our school system.
Well, thank you, Troy LaRaviere. I appreciate your.
So this is a history, and I've shown this before. These are how many school strikes there have been in Chicago. 1969, 2 days. 1971, 4 days. 1973, 12 days. 1975, 11 days. 1980, 10 days. 1983, 15 days. 1984, 10 days. 1985, 2 days. And look at the reasons: the salary increase and the length of the new contract. So it's the same. I mean, it's a year later. 10 days in 1984, school boards effort to deduct health insurance costs from teacher pay. This was under a Democratic mayor, by the way, Harold Washington. 1987, 19 days. Hey John, did you get a notification, by the way? Teacher and Pinochet is here too. Teachers want a pay increase of 15% over 2 years in 1987. A 19-day teacher strike. The board proposed removing 3 days from the school year, thereby reducing pay. The longest strike in the city's history lasted 19 days. Teachers want an 8% raise over 2 years, more sick days, and more health coverage. 7 days in 2012. So that was, and I think there was another threat of a teacher's strike last year or the year before that, and it just kept happening. It just keeps happening and happening and all the time. And by the way, who does the Chicago Teachers Union always endorse? The Democratic Party. Then the Democratic Party says, well, we don't have enough money to pay the teachers. Strike. Well, maybe something like school choice is the answer. Maybe something like moving out of the city is the answer, because this is a massive, unaccountable bureaucracy. And then they won't even say the word teacher union when it comes to what's happening in their school. John Sislowski says no notification. Do you have the bell checked? Because if you don't, then that's why. So that's it for Chicago schools. What are we going to talk about next? So you can see that the whole video, and again, I had to skip the beginning because we can't just keep going the whole afternoon here. I do have to leave soon. I'm actually going to spend the weekend at my dad's. So Trump offers $1 million for Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren to take DNA test to prove Indian ancestry. Rayoshiska says, so the liberals are eating themselves and trying to make it into a racial thing as well. They're using the people's resources to fatten their donors' pockets as well as their own. Imagine my fucking shock. Yeah, and by the way, if this guy gets elected in place of Emmanuel, it's going to be the same thing. He's not offering a vision for the city that's much different from Bill de Blasio in New York. And that's exactly what happened with him.
So who's going to cover? They're going to cover Bernie? Hey, they're going to cover, like, Sleepy Joe Biden? They're going to cover Pocahontas? Who was... Think of it. Think of it.
Oh, I got to reload.
Hey, they're going to cover, like, Sleepy Joe Biden? They're going to cover Pocahontas? Who was... Think of it. Think of it. She of the great tribal heritage. What tribe is it? Let me think about that one. Meantime, she's based her life. So who's
getting more and more annoying.
Want me to apologize for saying it, and I hereby Oh, no, I want to apologize. I'll use tonight. Pocahontas, I apologize to you. I apologize. To you, I apologize. To the fake Pocahontas, I won't apologize. No, it's causing her problems. You know, that name's causing, because now even the liberals are saying, take a test. Take a test. You know, I tell you, I shouldn't tell you because I like not to give away secrets, but this one. Let's say I'm debating Pocahontas, right? I promise you I'll do this. I will take, you know those little kits they sell on television for $2? Learn your heritage. Guy says, I was born in Scotland. It turns out he was born in Puerto Rico, and that's okay. It's good. You know, guy says, I was born in Germany. Well, he wasn't born in Germany. He was born someplace else. I'm going to get one of those little kits. And in the middle of the debate, when she proclaims that she's of Indian heritage, because her mother said she has high cheekbones. That's her only evidence, that her mother said she had high cheekbones. We will take that little kit and say, but we have to do it gently. Because we're in the Me Too generation, so we have to be very gentle. And we will very gently take that kit and we will slowly toss it, hoping it doesn't hit her and injure her arm, even though it only weighs probably 2 ounces. And we will say, I will give you $1 million to your favorite charity, paid for by Trump, if you take the test and it shows you're an Indian, you know. And let's see what she does, right? I have a feeling she will say no, but we'll hold that for the debates. Do me a favor, keep it within this room, because I don't want to give away any secrets. And the press is very honorable. They won't. Please don't tell her what I just said.
So there you can see he's actually like openly mocking Elizabeth Warren on stage, and this is great because it plays into the campaign of what's that guy's name? Shiva Yadure, the Indian guy who's actually Indian, who's campaigning against her. And I think it's a brilliant strategy because he's actually thrown down the gauntlet. And I saw this live, and you know what? People in Massachusetts really are asking what the hell is wrong with Elizabeth Warren not being forthright about her heritage. And I just wanted to go into that. Another thing that's happening is Alan Dershowitz, who I've never been a huge fan of because of his really, you know, it's beyond liberal. He's like really a kind of a semantic argument over morality and whatever. And now he's for you know, I think very selfish reasons, he's become kind of a Trump magnet or something because he offers some legal advice to Donald Trump, which I guess is, I mean, he can do whatever the hell he wants. I just think it's very odd. Well, I think the real reason I think he's doing it is because he's a supporter of President Trump's Middle East policies. And in reality, on a number of issues such as the border, he doesn't support Trump. So, you know, I don't necessarily consider Alan Dershowitz a credible person. I've criticized him numerous times, and I've said that, you know, he's kind of, you know, dishonest about what he thinks is, you know, he's dishonest about being a Democrat because the Democratic Party is really not very close to his belief system anymore. The Democratic Party has moved, the actual belief systems of Democrats as a whole have moved further and further to the left of his belief system. There's a person who used to be a civil rights campaigner back in the day who used to be one of the top figures within the Democrats, and you know, he's basically unwelcome among them now, and you know, deservedly so, I think. But in some ways, he's saying socially he's, and it's kind of funny because Joe Scarborough was making fun of him. So let's see if we can see any of that, if this will work. I think we're having a freeze up. Here we go.
Professor Alan Dershowitz joins us tonight. Professor Dershowitz, to start with the factual question, are you doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin?
Of course not. I hate Vladimir Putin. I hate what he stands for. I hate tyranny anywhere in the world. I'm not doing the bidding of Donald Trump. I oppose Donald Trump's immigration policies, his approach to Charlottesville, and when I have an opportunity, I tell him that. I am making the same arguments about civil liberties I've made for 50 years and that I would be making if Hillary Clinton had been elected president and people were trying to impeach her. But people talk about parties as if that's something serious. I don't care about parties. I'm invited to too many. But at a
Yeah, his streaming ability is really limited now. I don't know what the hell's happened. Dems have moved to the left of the left in the past 10 years. Yeah, I agree. Sorry about this streaming, but what the hell am I supposed to do here? I don't know why it has to keep loading too. Is my ad? I think my ad blocker crashed too. A second. Yeah, this is not going well. What the fuck is going on here? So I think my Chrome was crashing there. Gonna have to reload. So hold on. Yeah, I think we're gonna stop streaming, man. This is not going well. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later. This is going really, really bad. I guess have a good weekend, and we'll talk.